Hello and welcome to the Newstalgia podcast. I'm your host Wesley, and I'm here with
Cody.
And we are starting a new series here. Usually we are Newstalgia, obviously, but now it is the spooky season. It is Halloween. We're in the spirit, and it's all about Boostalgia. And our first episode is up now. If you haven't seen it, you should go check that out before you listen to the rest of this. But it's all about Vincent Price, specifically Vincent Price's cooking career, which I did not know was a thing until we did this episode.
I think a lot of people our age probably don't know a lot about him in general.
Yeah, which is weird because it's not like it was something he tried to hide. It was obviously something he was pretty passionate about, and he talked about every chance he got, but I had no idea. I was just scrolling through Instagram one day. Somebody posted a picture of the Cooking Price-Wise cookbook, and I was like, what the hell is this? Vincent Price cooking? And sure enough, I looked it up and was like, oh, I gotta buy this. And then I was like, wait a second, we could just do a video about this and I can actually justify buying this cookbook for no reason.
Yeah, it's a little something that's different than what we would usually do. Like, I think everything we've done so far, with the exception of Sesame Street, has been like a game or a movie or a television show or...
Yeah, and like a story behind it. It's like, oh, this happened and they made this and it didn't work out, or it didn't do well, or it did and then whatever. It's like a linear story, but this is just like, hey, Vincent Price? You like Vincent Price, right? He liked to cook. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
But,
and we've actually been working on this one. How long would you say we've had this one in mind?
Oh my God. We've been doing this one for months, I think. This was going to come out before the Sid and Marty Krofft episode. And just things kept pushing it back. And
yeah, we had some new projects that kept getting delayed and pushing this back. And then we decided that, well, hey, October's coming up. We should do something fun for October. And then here we are, first week of October.
Yeah,
finally
and we already had the first one ready in the can.
Yeah.
Because this just fit perfectly with the Halloween theme.
I mean, he is the master of macabre and all.
Yeah, and the master of cooking, apparently. But, yeah, I guess we could start by talking about our experience with cooking the
because
recipe.
I think that was kind of the part that made this episode so different, more or less, is the fact that we actually filmed something for this one, which, we've been talking about wanting to do more of, but this was the first time. Yeah,
we've done a little bit, like when we went to the CNN Center for the Sid and Marty Krofft one and all that, but we actually set up a whole shoot one night just in your kitchen and did the whole deal.
My wife was happy because I had to clean the kitchen before you came and we filmed. So I feel like we got to talk about the Cornish Hens because obviously that was that's the dish.
Yeah.
I don't know if a lot of people grew up eating Cornish hens. I know you said you didn't.
No, I don't think I'd ever had any.
But I mean, they're just little chickens, and my mom used to love them, so I had them a lot growing up. So that was just like a normal thing for me, was to have Cornish hens, and I've made them before as an adult, and that's part of why I picked this recipe, because I was familiar with it. And there was some parts that I'd never cooked before, so I wanted to try that, but I knew that I could get Cornish hens right. And we've said a million times, we live near Atlanta, so I have 3 grocery stores within a mile of my house, literally almost within walking distance if, the suburbs of Atlanta were a place that it was okay to walk on the side of the road. But I went to a Publix, I went to a Walmart, I went to a Kroger, 3 biggest grocery chains in the country, 3 of the biggest, and no Cornish game hens that I've gotten them at these stores before. No game hens. I asked the butcher guy, and he's like, oh yeah, we used to sell them fresh. We don't do that anymore. If we have them, they'll be frozen. They didn't have them frozen. And then you went to a Publix.
I called up my Publix, which is literally just right down the street. And I called them. I hit the button for the meat department. Somebody answered, and we're like, oh, okay, I gotta put you on with somebody else. And I was like, okay, well, I clicked the meat department button. I don't know why this person can't tell me, but okay. And then this guy answers the phone, and he's like, hello? I'm like, do you have any Cornish game hens? And I think he literally just said one word. I think he literally just said frozen. And I was like, okay, thanks.
Like, what
I
was his
guess-
job within the
I
grocery
guess
store?
the director of the meat department. I don't know, like the manager of the meat department. I have no idea.
He didn't have time for your little chicken bullshit.
No, he did not introduce himself or anything. It was a very brief conversation. But then once I got there, it was like they were super easy to find. I thought they'd be like tucked into some corner, but they were like right there.
Yeah, that's
in
what
the
I don't
open,
understand.
like a
I
big
had-
bucket of them.
I had none, and you literally had like 20 Cornish game hens like
It
sitting
might
in
have
an
been
open
even more
cart.
than that, and they were on sale. It was like 2 for $7 or something, and yeah, I think maybe like they weren't selling at yours, and they just shipped them all to this Publix for some reason because that was like an excessive amount of Cornish game hens.
It's disgraceful that Publix didn't have it near me. I'm so ashamed of Publix right now.
But yeah, I guess we should talk about actually like cooking them because that
Yeah.
was quite
Yeah, I
the
just-
experience.
Yeah, so I guess for people who'd want to know that those were my hands. That was me cooking in the video.
Everybody was dying to know whose hands those were.
Yeah, the magic hands that produced those delicious birds.
They saw you rubbing on that chicken breast. They're like, hell yeah.
Yeah, so I know we talk about it all the time, but you don't cook, right? Not really.
Not so much. Lately, I've started making like little crock pot meals or whatever. Like my girlfriend will be at school all day, and I'll just like throw some stuff in a crock pot and leave it. And that's, I mean, it's kind of cooking.
I mean, hey, it's got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So I grew up in a family of Southern cooks. So I was in the kitchen a lot as a kid, and later as like a teenager, it was just me and my dad. So I began cooking out of like necessity because my dad, he can make a mean spaghetti, but that's about it. So I started cooking out of necessity, and then, and Marissa works a weird schedule, so she works night shifts. So I am the cook of the house. So I cook most nights of the week. So this was, I don't know. I always think it's fun when you get to bring together like two of your favorite things for me, which is filmmaking and cooking. So that was extra fun. But one thing that I'm not good at with cooking or filmmaking is time management, and I think that was a problem with this video.
Yeah, that was a big problem because your wife, Marissa, she came back from, I think she was at school that day, right?
She was teaching her class. Yeah, so I told her, I was like, hey, don't worry about it. We're going to make this really nice meal from the Vincent Price cookbook. She was like, oh, you guys are finally doing that? Awesome. I can't wait to try it. And I told Wesley, I think, she got out, she was going to be done with the class at like 9 p.m. I told Wesley, I was like, come at 7 and we'll get started. That should leave us plenty of time.
It did not.
It
She
did
got
not leave us
home.
plenty of time. I think it was 9 o'clock and we were still, I was still zesting the oranges, which was like
Oh,
literally.
when she got home, we hadn't even like begun cooking. We had like just gotten set up.
I'm pretty
and
sure
we're about to
we
do
had
stuff.
just sliced the oranges, which was like the very first thing we did for cooking, which is embarrassing because, I mean, that's one thing we've always been bad at. Like literally every time me and you film something, we underestimate how long it's going to take. And
Yeah, I know there's a short film on our channel that we did probably a couple of years ago now, and we filmed that at your place like all throughout the night until like 3 or 4 in the morning, and everyone hated us afterwards.
yeah, we're just, I mean, I think that's a common thing for most filmmakers, but every time we're like, oh yeah, we'll have plenty of time. We'll be done at a reasonable time. We literally, we're skipping ahead a little bit, but what time do you think it was when we finally like plated everything? Was it like 10:30?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But luckily, we did get to eat a little before then because we ordered pizza and we were just like eating Papa John's the entire time we were cooking this stuff.
Yeah, when my wife got home and saw that we literally weren't even starting the cooking process yet, and you have to know it takes an hour to cook a Cornish game hen in the oven, and the wild rice that we had takes an hour to cook in the pot. So we were looking for at least an hour until any food was ready. So she immediately hopped online and ordered a pizza, and
I do not blame her.
We also ate some pizza while we were cooking. So
Yeah, and then I don't think Marissa even like
nope.
had any of the game hen after that.
We made 4 game hens and like a shit ton of wild rice, and you took 2 of the game hens and some of the rice home, and we kept some. And other than the little bit you and I ate like that night, like after we finished cooking, we didn't even eat them. We just let them sit in the refrigerator until we didn't want them, and then we threw them away.
That's a shame. It was
I
actually
know.
pretty tasty. I ate what me and you split one that night because like we had to see what it tasted like. But it was really good. It was really moist, and
I mean, Cornish game hens are always good. And I like to think I know what I'm doing in the kitchen. The only complaint I had is the sauce was not as good as it could have been because our
Oh,
stupid
yeah.
oranges.
God, we got 2 oranges that looked great. I mean, they looked fine. You can see them in the video, like before we sliced them both. But then you sliced into one of them, and it was just like black on the inside. It was just completely rotted. It was
So yeah, our
terrible.
sauce had half as much orange as it should have. Like we had all the zest we needed, but the actual like fruit of the orange, like the meat of the orange was we only had half of it. So I think the sauce could have been better. But other than that, we followed the recipe like exactly to a T. And
Yeah.
I mean, it was tasty. I think maybe some things could be changed to kind of update it and bring it more to modern taste. But I mean, it's definitely it's just so simple. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of hard to make something taste bad when it's literally just like a flavorful rice and flavorful chicken.
Yeah.
It was pretty good.
I went in on those leftovers too the next day. I didn't even use a knife and fork. I tried, and I was like, this is taking too long. So I just picked it up and ate it like a Viking, and just like had juices dribbling everywhere, and like it was messy, but it was good. That's some good chicken.
I'm glad somebody enjoyed it. I hate like people always say that like people who do cooking videos and they make those make shows on Food Network is that like who ends up eating the food are the people who just happen to be there, like the crew and stuff. I mean, you don't. A lot of times when you cook something, you're not like super excited about eating it because you've been working over it for so long.
Yeah.
And also
makes
we're
sense.
just really slow when it comes to filmmaking. So we filled up on pizza. I think I ate 3 slices of pizza.
Oh yeah, I definitely did.
The video came out really good though, so I was proud of
Oh
us for
yeah,
that.
definitely. It looks nice, at least. But we should talk about where the recipe came from, because I mean, obviously, it's in his treasury of great recipes. But he said it was from like a museum. I can't remember what museum.
Yeah, hang on, I can actually tell you. It's a museum in Virginia, but 1 second.
Yeah,
I actually have the book
because
sitting right
his
here by my
his
desk. So
cookbook
might
is
as well grab it, right?
yeah, his cookbook is all about like different recipes from around the world. I think we mentioned it in the video, but like they would just go to these different restaurants, and he would kind of put his own spin on them and throw them in the book. And
I mean, that's
it's
like
pretty cool.
That's the whole point of the book is, so the '60s were a time when a lot of the cuisine that's available in America now wasn't available yet, so people hadn't necessarily tried Asian and Mexican and French cuisine like all over the country. So he was adapting recipes from places that he was fortunate enough to travel to, so that people in Middle America could cook. I mean, back in the day, people in suburban Atlanta probably weren't eating, Cornish game hens with a Grand Marnier sauce like we were lucky enough to have. So it's the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts is where he went for this recipe. I guess it's a normal museum that throws like events and stuff. When they throw events, they have this big fancy menu that they cook from, and that's where he had it back in 1964.
Instead of Cornish game hens, they use squab.
Yeah, which if you don't know what a squab is, it's basically a farm-raised pigeon, or less.
Which is so nasty sounding, but
It sounds
I'm sure
nasty,
it's
but
good.
I mean, if you let a chicken loose in the streets of New York City, it would probably be just as nasty as a pigeon.
But yeah, I think it's cool that he actually like took the time to take these recipes and like kind of update them so that people could make them at home, because you could just easily throw some recipes in there and be like, oh, good luck, you'll buy it because it has my name on it. But he actually like made sure that every ingredient was at like local grocery stores and people could actually make this stuff. I know he mentions it in like the forward for one of the cookbooks where he talks about they had to check if like this certain like really specific ingredient was available at the grocery store, and they didn't want to put it in there if it wasn't, but they went and sure enough it was there, so they were like, okay, cool. But I just think it's cool that he took the time, because like he was rich. Like, he didn't have to worry about middle America being able to eat gourmet food. So the fact that he actually took the time to do it is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, he adapted it. It's not just a regurgitation of recipes that he found. I mean, he made it so that, like, I mean, granted, this is the 50th anniversary edition, so that tells you how long ago it's been. So some of the recipes are, tame by today's standards, but back then, this was stuff that the average person in America might not have ever tried. So it was new.
Yeah, because you don't think about, like, how much stuff has changed, like how many different people have come to America since then, how many just stuff has changed in general everywhere. Like, there weren't this many restaurants over where we live, like, back then, for sure.
No. I mean,
It's
but now you can pretty much have, you can have cuisine from every country in Asia within 15 minutes of you in the suburbs of Georgia. I mean, of all places.
yeah,
So
like,
it's
down my street alone, I know there's,
crazy.
like, a dozen Mexican places and, like, a few Indian places. Like, it's basically anything you could ever think about trying, you can get pretty easily.
And you got to think of the time when he was writing this cookbook. I mean, it was a time when going to a Mexican restaurant was like a big new thing. It was like the hot thing to do was go to a Mexican restaurant and get Mexican food, because even a Mexican restaurant was kind of I don't want to call it a fad, but it was new. Like the fact that restaurants were opening up and serving like food from other cultures, that was a new thing, which is it's crazy to think about, because
Yeah.
Mexican restaurants are now a place where you order takeout and you get like 1,000,000 pounds of rice and chicken and you're happy. But times have changed.
Like, what were people eating before there was, like, good food around? Just
I mean,
hamburgers and hot dogs every day.
I mean, you grew up in the South like I did. Think about the stuff that your grandmother was making. I mean, that's
Yeah, that's true. I guess that was it.
yeah.
But, yeah, he really was probably, like, him and Julia Child. And then, I mean, you got to think there was also no Food Network. Now there's, like, 1,000 cooking shows on TV at any given
God,
time.
yeah. I mean, we're so inundated with gourmet cuisine now, but back then, really, like you said, Julia Child, Vincent Price. I mean, these were the people who ushered in like that gourmet revolution when people started to really want to make like fancy food and like experience culture through cuisine, which, I mean, that's like one of my favorite things to do. When Marissa and I travel somewhere, when we're planning the travel, like that's the first, like maybe the second thing we look at after booking a hotel is like, okay, where are we going to dinner?
Yeah, now, like, anybody just, like, puts out a cookbook when they're, like, trying to
I couldn't believe that
their career or whatever.
when you were showing me the video, what you'd worked on. I can't believe Stanley Tucci has like multiple cookbooks.
Yeah, I had no idea. That's like somebody like 50 years from now is going to make a YouTube video about Stanley Tucci's cooking career.
Yeah, it is crazy. But let's talk about the man himself, because
Yeah, I was going to say, what is your relationship with Vincent Price? Like, when did you first start
so
hearing about him?
my whole childhood, I spent a lot of time around, with my grandparents, and they were, I mean, they're younger, but they grew up watching a lot of his movies, and I remember him being on the TV a little bit, but I didn't really, I guess, know who he was until Edward Scissorhands. So that was
Yeah.
like the first real introduction. I mean, you got to remember, Edward Scissorhands came out in what, 94?
Yeah, something
So
like that.
I was like 2 years old, so I didn't even watch Edward Scissorhands until I was probably 10.
Yeah.
So that was really my first introduction, and Thriller. My dad loved Michael Jackson and that album specifically, so I grew up hearing his voice and that laugh.
Yeah, I know you'd hear Thriller you still hear Thriller all the time, but I still remember in, like, elementary school and stuff, you'd, like, hear it as if it was a brand new song or something.
Oh,
and
yeah, constantly.
You remember that voice, but you don't know who it is when you're, like, 6 years old or whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, even as an adult, I can't really say I've seen more than just a few of his movies.
Yeah, I definitely need to do, like, a deeper dive, but there's a few that I'd seen that I didn't even, like, realize he was in. Like, I threw in that clip of Iron Tail in the Peter Cottontail movie, like the old
Yeah, you told
Rankin
me about
Bass
that.
cartoon.
You told me
Yeah,
about that.
they're the guys who did all the, like, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and, like, all those, like, puppet looking ones, and that's, like, the weirdest Easter special ever, and I never realized it was Vincent Price doing the voice of this. He's this evil bunny who, instead of having a cottontail, he has one made of iron, and it like rattles around when he shakes it.
It's really creepy.
It's terrifying. There's a lot of
He was
scary
also
shit
in,
in
like,
that movie.
The Great Mouse Detective, right? He did a voice for that.
Yep. He was the villain in that. And then,
I just think he was around so much when I was a kid, but I didn't like, you don't. It's like when you watch a movie as an adult that you liked as a kid and you realize, like, holy shit, that's so-and-so that is now this person that I have a total, such a greater appreciation for. I think that he's going to be that person for a lot of people. Like, we were talking to my friend Tyler yesterday, and he had no clue who Vincent Price was. We ran through everything that we thought he would know him from, and he didn't know. So,
which is crazy because I was thinking, like, when I made the video, I was like, oh, maybe I'm like hitting it too hard with the like explaining who he is. Where I'm like, oh, he was in this and this. I'm like, people know who he is, but I guess some people still don't.
I think it's like a lot of the videos we've made. Our older viewers probably grew up seeing him a lot more than our younger viewers did. And we've said this between me and you a lot of times, but after a while, Vincent Price was more famous for just being Vincent Price than he was for his acting. So
yeah,
I'm trying to think of a
very
person
much like he's like a brand, like
like a personality.
Like somebody today who is similar to him.
I'm just trying to think of like a quick comparison, but
there's really nobody. Like, we were thinking about it while we were cooking. We were like, who would today's Vincent Price be? Because like, there's really nobody. Like, who's a Renaissance man who's like creepy but like charming, and like, I don't know. There's really just nobody like him. He's like
Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
You said creepy.
I mean,
he paints.
There's really nobody. Oh, he does paint.
No,
That's
I'm
true.
just joking. There really isn't. We talked about it. We looked at some dumb lists online.
Yeah, there was like a list on Bloody Disgusting. Like, no disrespect to them, but this list was terrible. They were like Carl Urban and Doug Jones, and I was like, how are these guys anything like Vincent Price? Like,
yeah,
it's not even a comparison. I was thinking Hugh Jackman. He's still not like, he's a guy who like has other interests. If you wanted to like compare it that way, where he's into like theater and stuff.
I mean, you went to his big one-man show, right?
Oh my gosh, it was awesome. He did like a whole tour of arenas, and he came here and he did all the songs from like Greatest Showman and Les Mis and stuff. I was crying.
Of course you were. But yeah, I think it still stands, is that especially somebody who got famous from scaring people doesn't stick around to be like this cultural icon. I mean, he was showing up on Carson like long after he had like, I won't say his career declined, but long after he was like really like the master of macabre, that era of his career was over. He was still showing up all the time on late night TV.
Yeah, it's kind of wild how many appearances he made on there, because just going down the YouTube rabbit hole of interviews, he's on there all the time. Like,
I gotta say that the dishwasher fish clip where he talks about boning things, that might be one of my favorite clips we've included in any video we've done.
It's hilarious. He's so funny, and you wouldn't expect, like, I don't know, he has such like a cool sense of humor. He was very like just a weird dude. But you should definitely, everybody should go look at all of his interviews online.
I just think there's so much. I just think there's so much more to him as a person that a lot of people don't even realize, and even like his past. Like you talk about it a little bit in the video about his grandfather being, I guess a food industry magnate, and his father was a big part of the candy industry. That's just so strange. You just never know where people come from.
The president of the National Candy Makers Association.
What did you ever find out what company he was the head of?
I did not. I'm not sure, but I do wonder who else was part of the National Candy Makers Association. I don't know who was like
the Wrigley family or like the Hershey's. I mean,
I guess. I mean, I figured they'd all have to be in there. Willy Wonka.
Well, Willy Wonka is. Who makes Willy Wonka? like an established company that does that.
I'm
Nestle,
pretty
I
sure
think.
Nestle does it, and
Of course.
you can't even buy Wonka bars anymore. That's like
Yeah,
part of the
they
reason.
just discontinued it like last year.
That's like part of the reason I want them to do a remake of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, because then you'll be able to buy Wonka bars again.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because that's a Tim Burton Johnny Depp movie, the most
Oh,
recent
yeah.
one.
It's cool that Tim Burton was able to work with Vincent Price because he was such a big fan. He made a like stop motion movie called Vincent that's about like a kid who wants to be Vincent Price or something like that. And so obviously that was like one of his idols. So it's cool that his last on-screen appearance is like a death scene in a Tim Burton movie. It's pretty fitting.
It's a pretty fitting send off because he did pass away like right after the filming of that movie was completed, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't think he was even alive when it released.
Yeah, and he was supposed to be in it more. We found out he
Yeah.
was supposed to be in it way more than just like the 2 or 3 scenes he's in, but he was pretty sick at that point, but he still gives like an awesome performance, which is
Yeah.
crazy to think about that he was still like on his A game even like that late into it.
I would imagine, I assume, if you're into the kind of stuff that we are and you're watching this video, you've probably seen Edward Scissorhands. So
That
we're
was
not-
like
we're
my
not spoiling anything.
oh yeah, spoiler. that movie was like my obsession when I was really young. That's still one of my favorites.
I still don't think Tarantino has ever. I'm not Tarantino. Jesus, Burton has ever topped that. And I think I was thinking Tarantino because in the same way that I don't think Tarantino has ever topped Pulp Fiction. So like these guys, early in their career, like peaked for me.
Yeah, I
mean-
know like Beetlejuice and Mars Attacks are both like pretty good too, but like nothing tops Edward Scissorhands for me. That's
I agree.
just like peak Tim Burton right there. Like if you were gonna show somebody one Tim Burton movie, like that would be it.
It's crazy that I guess this mostly for our generation, but that image of Vincent Price, like what he looked like in that movie, like that's how he's remembered by most people of our age these days. It's crazy that such a small role, and it was literally the last role of his career and life,
It's basically a cameo.
and it's like that's what defines him for like multiple generations of people, which is awesome.
He has such a cool filmography because you could tell that he was like down for anything. Like the fact
Apparently,
that
he did over 100 movies, right?
yeah, but like some people will probably kind of like turn down their nose at some stuff, or like I don't know. Once you get older, or you think you're too big for certain things, especially if you're like a really successful actor, you might be like, I'm not doing this shit. But he like did anything that was like cool and new. It's like even like as an old man, he was still had his finger on the pulse of like what was hip. He was working with like Alice Cooper and Michael Jackson. Like
Yeah.
he still was like very hip, and I don't know, I think kids liked him back then still, and I think kids who know who he is now still think he's cool. Like he's just
he's
like universally
basically
well liked.
He's basically like the goth kid god. Like,
Yeah, basically. I was saying that picture of him with Tim Burton and Johnny Depp is like a goth kid's like dream
Wet
come
dream.
true. Or that picture of him with Gomez Adams and Elvira. That's like peak goth kid energy right there.
that's true.
We should talk more about his grandpa's company, Dr. Price, because he had the baking powder company, and
Yeah.
there was some controversy with it apparently, with their recipe. I guess they had like cream of tartar in there, but then they replaced it with phosphate, and it was a big deal apparently.
In Arkansas.
In Arkansas, of all places, they took out a full-page ad, and it is huge, and there's tons of paragraphs, so I won't read the whole thing, but real big, it says, "To the wholesale and retail grocers and the housewives of Arkansas, read the inside facts concerning the war on Dr. Price's cream baking powder," which is already very intense, but then it says, like, facts to remember, that the attempt to hinder the sale of Dr. Price's cream baking powder in Arkansas is the work of a jealous competitor, and that the people of Arkansas have made no complaint and have no grievance. It's like, Very, very intense.
What I'm getting from that is you don't mess with cream of tartar in Little Rock.
Apparently it was a very big deal, but they made no grievance. It was the jealous competitors of the
Oh, you're right.
crazy competitive baking powder industry. But
It's just so strange to me. I mean, like you wouldn't know that if you just watched his movies and liked his and like had a cookbook or something. But it's so strange to me that like you just never know where like people come from. Like there's so many weird stories from people's lives.
yeah, and he didn't even like mention it in any of the interviews I saw. He just said that his dad was a successful businessman. That was it. But
I guess maybe he didn't want people to feel like he had come from a bunch of money and had like a huge advantage or something. Maybe I don't know.
I mean, he didn't really hide it either. He was just like, oh, he was a successful businessman. Like we were pretty like well off, and but he really kind of just got lucky as far as like becoming an actor because he was in like one play as like a little bit part, and then he got cast in another play in a bigger role, and from there it just kind of like took off. He had no like classical training or anything. He went to Yale and was getting like an art history degree, I think.
Yeah.
But that's the other thing he was like very into. It's kind of hard to find him talking about the cooking. Like there's a few instances of it, but he really loves to talk about art. Like he was a big time art collector. And it's wild because it wasn't like he got rich and then he was like, oh, time to buy some paintings. It was like something he'd always been into. Like he was telling a story in one interview when he was like 12 years old, he bought a Rembrandt painting and he got it for $35 at the time, which is insane. The guy let him come in and like put $5 down on it like every other week or whatever. And then he owned a Rembrandt at like age 12, and I think he eventually sold it because times got tough or whatever. But he was a big time art collector. And then, of course, we talk about that trip that he went on when he was like 16 or 17.
Yeah.
And went like all over Europe. Like, what kid at that age is like, I want to go see all the art? Like, he was like all about it. He was really about that life. It wasn't like, oh, I'm rich, time to do rich people stuff. He was like always very into it. And there's actually there's a website. Sorry, there's a website. I don't remember what it is, or like a blog. But if you type in enough words, you can find it that where they really go over like his entire trip. Like there's some pictures, not really pictures of him, but there's some of the journal entries and pictures of the places that he went to, and it kind of just like puts his entire trip like in order, and you can see like where he went and what kind of things he did on that trip, which is kind of cool.
You gotta love the internet.
Yeah.
What I was gonna say is, I think you and I have laughed about it before, but like there, I mean, he wasn't like secretive about it. Like he enjoyed being famous, and I think he enjoyed being famous because it allowed him to really get into his like passions of. Like he loved acting, but I think he also just as much loved food and cooking and art. And of course, being rich allows you to really do those things a lot more and a lot easier.
Yeah, that's why we were saying that he took so many roles. Because I was thinking about it because he did like a bunch of weird stuff. I know there's those advertisements for Cousins subs, which we didn't put in the video, but we're gonna post them on our social media so people can see these. But it was like a chain of sandwich shops like in some random state, I can't remember, but he was like the spokesperson for this like random chain of sub sandwiches. So I looked it up and I was like, did he have like money problems or something? Like I don't want to be like rude about it, but I was like, he did like a lot of stuff that you wouldn't expect, and I couldn't find anything. The only thing I found when I looked it up was that when he recorded the little like rap portion for Thriller, they asked him if he wanted $20,000 right there or if he wanted part of the royalties for Thriller, and he went with the $20,000, and then Thriller went and became like the best-selling album ever, and he missed out on all those royalties. So that kind of sucks.
I think he was doing okay. I'm sure he also had some money from his family too. Like,
Yeah. Also, I think he just loved to work. Like, he just loved doing stuff. Like, it seemed like he had fun with everything. You hear him talk about, like, scenes from his movies or whatever. There's, like, a part in an interview on The Tonight Show, like, Kermit the Frog was hosting. He was filling in for Carson, and he's just talking about scenes from his movies where he's, like, killed people or gotten killed, and he just, like, gets all, like, giddy about it. He's just, like, having a blast with it, which is pretty cool. And I don't know, you can just really tell how much he liked it. And I don't think it was about the money either, because I saw another thing where he did the narration for some like museum exhibit in New Mexico, I believe. And I think they still use his narration as far as I know. And he did it in like one or two takes, and they said, oh, how much do you want for it? And he said, just buy me lunch. Like, that was it. So I don't know. He just seemed like a really cool guy. And when you watch these interviews, it's weird to think that he was known for being like scary and creepy, because like he's just nice.
Yeah, that's not really who he comes across as in person. I mean, and as we're wrapping up, I guess that's like, if you're interested in him, like, really, like, go look up into his life, because this dude, I mean, he lived like a full life. Like,
Yeah.
he did everything that like you could want to do. I mean,
Definitely.
he did a million movies. I mean, he traveled all over the world, tried cuisine from everywhere, got married 4 times. I mean, it just
And he worked with like everybody too. Like,
yeah.
you see pictures of him with Alfred Hitchcock. He was able to work with him like once. It was like an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents that Hitchcock actually directed. So he
Yep.
worked with like him. He worked with Orson Welles. And then I saw somewhere that Orson Welles' dad and Vincent Price's dad were friends in childhood. I don't know if it's true or not. There was a picture of them together, but I don't know what they actually look like. So it could have been them. I like to think that it was, because that's kind of like a weird thing. But
Small world kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah, who knew that they would have kids that became like some of the biggest names in movie history, like, ever.
But if you follow his career, you're basically following the progression of the film industry from like the very beginnings
Yeah.
of sound on film up until the 90s, which is like really when the film industry became more like what it is today. I mean, obviously it's changed a lot since then, but he really
Just imagining like the things that he saw, like,
almost 60 years of being in the film industry. I mean, he saw so much, and he just always seemed like a happy, good, like just a normal, good guy. Maybe a little eccentric, but I guess you have to be the master of macabre.
yeah, and he had kids that he seemed to have a really good relationship with. I think.
His daughter writes so fondly of him in the forewords of both of our books. So
Yeah, and it seems like she's really down to talk about him, like, even still, and kind of like keep his legacy alive. And apparently when she came out as a lesbian, that he was very like supportive, and that's cool, because you never know. Like, back in the day, like, some people are set in their ways, and like some people are just shitty, but he was like a cool guy. Also, she said that he was bisexual, which I don't know if it's like true or not, but you could, I mean, take of that what you will. But
I mean, he was a rich guy in the heyday of the swinging 60s. So
Yeah.
swinging 60s and the 70s. So yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
I think it was when he married like Coral Brown. I think maybe she was also bisexual. I think it was her, and she apparently made some comment that he could stop seeing guys and she could stop seeing women. But he was a very like progressive guy for his day, which
It's
kind of
interesting.
shows up in the cooking too, because it's like a lot of people weren't doing what he was doing.
Yeah, it was. I think it was interesting to make a video about just an interesting person instead of like an interesting thing. So it was fun. This was a good one.
Yeah,
I enjoyed this one.
I definitely think so. So now I want to try more recipes from his book.
Yeah, I mean, I had the cookbook, and next time I want to make something fancy, I might have to pull it out again.
Yeah, I posted the video on Reddit, and somebody said that his pork over plums and prunes is really good.
I have to try it out.
Yeah, it sounds interesting.
Yep.
But yeah, he was just a really cool guy, and he was rich, but he was never like bougie. He was like, I don't know, he just seemed like a guy you could hang out with.
Yeah, and I think that's why it was perfect for this one to be the first one for Newstalgia. I mean, I know this exact topic about cooking isn't exactly like spooky, but he's just who better to start it off than Vincent Price? Like, he's literally the master of it, so
Yeah,
it's perfect.
He's iconic, and I think he'd be happy to know that people are still like looking at his recipes, and I think he'd be really happy to see like how popular cooking is now with like
Yeah.
Food Network and stuff. I'm sure he couldn't have even imagined, because if he was alive now, he'd be like a judge on Chopped and like showing up on an episode of Hot Ones or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was a cool guy. He did a lot of cool stuff, and you could get lost in like hours of interviews, and obviously his movies. Like, you could just watch everything, and it would probably take you years to get through it all, because he was just everywhere. But
Yep. So that's the first episode of Boostalgia. So hopefully we'll have some more coming up for you.
yeah, definitely, we have a few things in the works that should be pretty good. But this'll definitely be a favorite of mine for a while, because he's just a cool guy.
Yep.
But definitely stay tuned. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Instagram at Viewers Productions. And we'll have some more episodes, and we'll be posting a lot of cool Vincent Price stuff on there in the meantime, between episodes. But yeah, we'll see you next time for some more Boostalgia.
Yep. We'll see you.